Podcast Answer Man, episode number 10, an interview with Chef Mark Tafoya. Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Podcast Answer Man, a podcast about podcasting, and recently a podcast about interviewing and speaking with other podcasters. And today is no different than that. In fact, I am yet once again having the privilege of talking to one of my favorite podcasters, and today we are speaking with Chef Mark Tafoya of the remarkable Palate podcast. A podcast about cooking and a podcast that really takes on a different flavor of podcasts that I've ever really listened to, as we'll get into today. But first, I just want to go ahead and introduce you to the man himself, Chef Mark. Chef Mark, how are you, sir?
Hey, Cliff. How you doing?
I've never been better, and it gets better every day.
Good. I love that. A different flavor. Well, of course it's a different flavor. We're talking about food.
That's right. And so I'll tell you, let's go ahead and can you just tell us a little bit about yourself, just a little background about who Chef Mark is?
Sure. I am from Albuquerque, New Mexico, where my family has lived for nearly 400 years.
I'm sorry, how many years?
Yeah, nearly 400.
Oh, okay. You did say 400.
Yeah, my family was among some of the original Spanish that came to New Mexico in the 1500s.
Wow.
And we've been there ever since. And I'm one of the few members of my family who has left New Mexico in that time. So I live in New York City. I went to school on the East Coast. I went to Yale. I majored in French and theater. I was an actor for several years. And then I sort of got to a point in my life where I thought, I want to do something else for a while. So I actually became a chef. I've always been passionate about food and cooking. And so I became a personal chef. So I started blogging and then podcasting, thinking that it would be a really great way to promote my personal chef business. And it actually has morphed into something entirely different. It turned out not to have been as direct a way to promote my business, although sort of in a roundabout way I've gotten a lot of business from it. But it's actually morphed into this whole media thing. And so with my partner, Jennifer Yanolo, we created The Gilded Fork, which is an online food magazine which celebrates the sensual pleasures of food. And we took the beginnings that I had from starting the Remarkable Palate podcast and brought together a bunch of other podcasters, and now we run the Culinary Podcast Network.
That is amazing. Isn't it funny how once you start with one idea on podcasting, it really takes on a life of its own?
It does. I mean, you're a great example of that.
Yeah, it definitely, I mean, if you have a passion and if you have a desire, it's amazing how many people out there, regardless of what your passion is, if you're passionate about it, there are other people who are also passionate about that, who want to listen and get involved with other people who are passionate about whatever topic it is.
Absolutely, yeah.
The biggest example of that to me is, I'm not sure if you've heard me talk about her before, but Rachel Lisi. She came to me.
Yeah.
She came to me and talked to me, and she says, I'm thinking about doing a podcast about Sims 2. It's like, oh yeah, for PlayStation. Well, not necessarily for PlayStation. This is just for the PC version. I'm like, okay, so you're gonna limit it to them. So I'm thinking, I'm putting this in a box. They get, okay, how do I tell her? Okay, well, give it a shot, But she's really found her audience.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. There's such a limited, narrow topic. And actually, I believe, would you agree with me that the more narrow your focus is, as long as you're passionate about it, that even makes it so much more of a draw?
It certainly makes it easier to find a core audience when you have a very narrow focus. It sometimes makes it difficult in terms of, you might think to market it and to grow it beyond that into larger numbers. But the truth is that every podcast sort of probably has its own sort of native numbers, sort of like the amount that it can handle or should handle. And certain podcasts have an intimacy because they have a small, intimate group of people that are the listeners that maybe other podcasts that have larger audiences might not have. So I just think it's so great. There's space and room for every kind of podcast and every kind of audience, as well as participation. I mean, I think, like you say, there's certain passionate things that people are just so passionate about. I would never think to be passionate about The Sims 2 because it's not something that I play.
Exactly, but yet she is extremely passionate about it, and there are people all over the world listening to her. And when I think about this, I mean, now for me, Mark, I remember always having a desire to learn things with technology and even communicating with people. I don't know if you ever had that when you were younger, but for me, I remember the first CB, the Citizens Band, getting my first CB and being able to talk to somebody on the other side of town. Did you ever have an experience like that?
I didn't. I mean, we didn't. Growing up, I didn't have. My parents didn't have a lot of money, so they didn't buy me things like that. But I certainly was very into it, and from an early age, I was a performer. I was an actor since I was 10 or 12, and I actually started my first dinner theater production when I was 14. I mean, I thought I've arrived. I'm getting paid to act. And then, I did a lot of theater in high school, and of course I majored in French and theater in college, and then, came to New York, became a professional actor. So I kind of have always had that in me, and this is just sort of an interesting, different kind of incarnation of that same desire to communicate with people.
It is. I guess you had mentioned it before, but I'm sure you've heard me say this before. I hear things, but yet I don't always put two and two together. But now it's just really ringing true for me. You've shared before that you were in theater and that you were an actor in our Lost podcast, but I really never thought of and put two and two together that you have been in theater and that you've acted.
Yeah.
Until just now.
I worked for the National Actors Theater for a while, which was a company founded by Tony Randall. And
oh, wow.
And so for a year I was with the company, and we did 2 shows on Broadway. I did a production of The School for Scandal, which is a Richard Brinsley Sheridan restoration comedy. So it came from the 18th century Britain. And we had some pretty prominent people in the cast. Tony was in it. Simon Jones, who many people know from the old Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and he's been in some of the Monty Python films. But then after that, we did a production of Inherit the Wind, which is a classic American play which deals with the Scopes Monkey Trials, the famous Scopes Monkey Trials in Dayton, Ohio. And that starred George C. Scott and Charles Durning, along with Tony Randall and some other prominent actors. So that was really it's an amazing highlight of my time as an actor, because I got to be on Broadway with George C. Scott.
That is funny because I mean, one of the things when I was in college, and I've never really shared this in any of the podcasts, I don't think, before, but in college I was a theater minor. And I always remember The Odd Couple, because Tony Randall was in the television series The Odd Couple, right?
Yes.
And so one of the very first plays that I played in, I played the character he played on television in a play.
You played Felix.
I played Felix in the Odd Couple, the actual play itself. And I remember that was the first, I had to remember the word phenobarbital. It was the first time I'd ever heard of phenobarbital. But I always had the hardest time with that one line.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah. One of my favorite lines was actually Oscar's line, where he talks about, I come home and I find these notes on my pillow. We're out of cornflakes. F you. Clean up the bathroom. F you. It took me an hour to figure out that F you stood for Felix Unger.
Yes, that was awesome. That is a classic play, by the way.
Yeah, Neil Simon is really a brilliant writer.
He is.
All his stuff is just brilliant. It's hard to ruin Neil Simon. It's all right there for you as an actor. Like everything, it's written in, the way it's written is just, the timing is so great with all of those plays.
It is. Let me ask you something else about your, just a little bit more of your personal background, and that is that you're are you a world traveler? I mean, you've been around.
I have, yeah. It's one of my other passions. I mean, my 3 great passions in life are travel, performing, and food. And yeah, I've been blessed. I've been able to travel a lot of places. My first big traveling was when I was in college. I did a junior year abroad in France, which was appropriate because I was a French major. And during that time, I was able to travel all over Western Europe and Greece and Italy and Spain and Switzerland and all those places. And then over the years, that I just got the bug. And so I've gone to a lot of places. I've been to most countries in Europe. I've been to several countries in Asia. Haven't made it to Africa yet or Australia, so those are or South America. So those are still on my, on my radar as places I'd like to go.
Wow. Now, now that you're into podcasting, do you ever think of how much different it would have been if you could have done sound seeing tours back then?
Oh God, that would have been so great. But let me tell you, I got a little taste of that last year because I went on a press trip to Spain, to Rioja. And so I was able to do some sound scene tours from Spain, which was really nice because that's where my heritage lies. My family, my name is Tafoya, and there is a town in the north of Spain in Navarra, which is a region of Spain right next to Rioja. And the town is called Tafalla, Tafalla. It's spelled slightly differently from my name, but that is the name from which our name comes. And so last year, or 2 years ago, when was it? Oh gosh, a year and a half ago. I don't know, whenever it
It
was.
was about a year and a half ago.
My yeah, there you go. Thanks. My family and I, we traveled there together to Tafaya, so it was really nice to see that.
Oh, okay. I was thinking about the press tour. That wasn't quite a year ago, though.
No, the press tour was just back in October.
Okay, that's
but
right.
there we stayed in Rioja, which is to the west of Navarra.
And
But yeah, that was great. So I got to do some sound scene tours. We did a tapas crawl in a town called Logroño. There's a place called Calle Laurel, or the Street of the Laurels, and it's very famous for tapas. So it's this whole neighborhood, and every single spot is a tapas place. And at night, basically, everyone congregates there and they have their drinks and they go to a different tapas bar. Every bar has its own specialty of, they basically just do one dish, one kind of food. And then you have something there, you have a drink, you go to the next bar, you get their dish. And so you could just have your whole evening spent enjoying yourselves, hanging out in the middle of the street with all your friends or new friends, and have some of the really great, really inexpensive wines, and eat some amazing food. I mean, some beautiful wild mushrooms and some really great serrano ham and the famous white asparagus of northern Spain. Just some amazing dishes, and they're cheap. They're so inexpensive, and it's so casual.
And I share very little passion for some of the unique foods that you do, but I will tell you that I was enthralled. I don't know if that's the right word, but I was totally right there with you during the sound seeing tour as you were going along. And I really felt as though I was there. I mean, I sat on the couch, I was closing my eyes, and I'm sitting there listening to you, going from place to place, talking about what you're seeing, and that's what I love about sound seeing tours, especially with a nice digital audio recorder that has a real crisp stereo sound.
Oh yeah.
And you're using some special equipment, something that I think I may have even told you about. You want to tell us about the equipment that you use for that?
Yeah, actually, that's an interesting topic because I've used several different pieces of equipment, which it sort of evolved over time, and I actually have a great deal of appreciation for a couple of different pieces of equipment. But right now, I'm using the Edirol R09, which I had my eye on, and I'm so glad that you actually took the plunge and bought one and started podcasting with it and playing with it, because that was when I heard that I said, "Ah, great, I've got to get that." Because I've actually prior to that I was using the Marantz PMD 660, which is an amazing piece of equipment. It's really great. I mean, it really has been the industry standard for field recording for reporters for quite a couple of years now. The only issue with it is just a little bit larger. The Edirol is so small and compact that I find that it just goes with my lifestyle in such a way that I'm basically able to carry it with me everywhere. And any moment that I have the opportunity to record, I can whip it out, and in 10 seconds I can be recording.
Absolutely.
I have it set up so that I can, I basically have 3 ways of recording with this setup. As you know, the Edirol has onboard mics, which I use on occasion, but not that often. Mostly, I've used the onboard mic when I'm recording myself cooking in a kitchen cast, and I set it on the table, and it's able to gather all of the room noises. And in those instances, I really want all of the room noises. I really want to hear the sound of the saute pan sizzling, and I want to hear the sound of the knife as I'm chopping the vegetables. But in other cases, you don't want that. So that's really one of the few times. Sorry, that's really one of the few times that I use that. And then I've got it set up so that I also use binaurals. I have a pair of binaural microphones, which for people who may not know they're like stereo headphones, only instead of hearing out of them, you're actually recording into them. And I don't know. Have you spoken about binaurals before on your podcast?
No, in fact, that's the one. That was the other piece of equipment that I had told you about that I'd heard from. What show was that? That was the something experiment, the digital media experiment.
Oh, okay.
And
so you'd heard some binaural recordings, but you've never used them.
No, I've never used them, but I did tell you about them.
Well, I've been using them actually for almost a year now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've had them for a while. They were actually the first microphones, the first actual microphone that I bought were the binaural microphones. And so I've been using them for quite a while, and they're really great. I love them. The particular ones I have are from Microphone Madness, and I purchased them from B&H Photo and Video. And there are other brands of binaural microphones. What I love about these ones is they look just like earbuds with, the kind that have the little clip that goes behind your ear.
Yes.
Those kind of headphones. And so if I'm walking in the street with my Edirol and the binaurals, people think I'm just listening to some kind of MP3 player.
And not only that, but if you have your Edirol and it happens to be like a place where it's a little chilly and you've got a jacket, the Edirol fits right in your pocket and you can be recording, right, and people don't even realize it. I mean, they don't even pay attention to you.
Yeah. And the whole thing about that is that because even if you're holding the Edirol, people think it's an MP3 player. Mm-hmm. Whereas with the Marantz, it's just a big piece of equipment, and
right,
it looks really professional and everything, and it's great, but it's very, I mean, you can't be subtle about recording with the Marantz.
Absolutely.
So I have the binaurals, and let me just explain what binaurals are, because they're essentially stereo microphones, but because they're split and you wear them on different sides of your head, they create a really rich sound scene experience. They create a stereo recording, but each side is recording the stuff that is on that side, because they're facing outward from your head. Mm-hmm. So they're on your ear, they're facing 180 degrees different direction. So a good example of this is if I'm walking down the street and a fire truck comes by, and let's say the fire truck is behind me and on my right, and then it's going across, down the street. So you're going to hear it really strong in the right ear and not so strong in the left ear, and then as it goes by, it's gonna sort of get really loud because it's getting closer to you, and then as it leaves, it'll be really strong in the left ear. So if you're listening to a sound scene tour recorded with binaurals and you close your eyes, you're literally hearing exactly what the person who recorded it heard.
Exactly. In fact, that's what I love about stereo recording is that whole feeling of literally being where that person was. And that stereo sound. That for me, I believe a sound singing tour has to have some sort of stereo setup, whether they be binaurals in one in each ear, or at least get a decent stereo condenser mic that is basically pulling it from two different ends to where you kind of get the same sound and same feature.
That's the key. The one thing about the Edirol, I think some criticism has been made, this is a valid criticism, is that the placement of the microphones on the Edirol, they're just sort of facing the same direction, which means that if you were just to walk around with the Edirol itself, you might not get the same kind of quality as with binaurals or with, let's say, some of the equipment that has an XY configuration.
Yes. And another thing about the Edirol, the Edirol R-09 is what we're talking about by Roland, is that it does not come with any sort of windscreen. And so when you're out in the open, if there happens to be a breeze that comes by, because the condenser microphones are so sensitive, it really clips a lot when there's a good breeze blowing out there. So you almost have to either have an external mic that you'll be using with a windscreen on it, or I guess I've heard other people taking a rubber band and some kind of foam that they rubber band around the unit itself.
That's a funny story. When I first started podcasting, I'll tell you, this is crazy. I had a third generation iPod, and there was a little piece of equipment. In fact, I have it right here. I'm going to pull it out. It's a little plug-in microphone made by Belkin, and it's just a one-piece thing, and it has a mini jack and then a tiny little other plug thing that fit onto. If anyone remembers the third generation iPod, it had in the center of it was where you would plug in the headphone jack. So it would go into that, and there was a little like rectangular thing that would also go into that, and then this would enable you to record. And I thought I was great. I was like running around with my iPod recording things, and of course it records at 8,000 hertz, eight
Oh no.
8 megahertz, which is horrible. And also because the iPod is essentially a hard drive, every time the hard drive would turn, you would hear it recording. So it wasn't so bad if I was out and about, but it was really bad. I did a few interviews where I set it on a desk and I was interviewing people, and I thought, oh wow, I'm really great. I'm an audiophile. Where that really ran into problems was trying to import some of the recordings into Cast Blaster and then playing them through Cast Blaster, because I found that unless they were recorded at the proper bit rate, and then they actually played, they had this horrible twisted metallic sound, and in some cases it was just pure noise.
Right.
So I said to myself, okay, I know that I'm into this podcasting. It works for me. I've got to get better equipment. But the point of that story is that because I was doing a lot of sound scene tours and tours at the Green Market, which was pretty windy, I took a piece of styrofoam and I laid it over the little Belkin microphone, and I taped around the entire unit so that there would always be a little bit of a windscreen there. And it helped, but it didn't help so much because the quality of the actual recordings were so bad to begin with.
That is classic.
But now I've sunk a lot of money into this podcasting thing.
Yes, that it tends to happen to the best of us. So I have one of the other last things that I'll mention about the Edirol is not only is it great for out and about recording. I don't know if you know this, but I no longer record any audio into any computer system anymore, Mark.
Yeah, I know. You told me that. That's great. And I like that you're able to route it in the way that you route it through your mixer.
Exactly. So basically what I do is I use the tape out RCA jacks from my mixer, and I use a little patch cable that takes two RCAs, right and left, and it condenses it all down into a stereo 1/8-inch jack, and I plug that directly into the line in on my Edirol, and every podcast is directly recorded right into the Edirol. And the nice thing about the Edirol, it'll record into all kinds of different bit rates for MP3, or you can actually record straight into uncompressed wave format.
Which is what I use. I used wave format for all my recordings on the Edirol.
Well, you probably go in and edit some though, right?
I do, but even if I don't edit, I can then put it up in Audacity, add the music, and then output it as an MP3 file for the final version. I just don't like the idea of using MP3 files and then compressing them further for another MP3 file.
Well, see, that's the thing. Exactly. But the thing is once I'm done recording, for example, our interview right here is being recorded directly into 128 kilobit MP3, and as soon as I hit play, all I'm going to do is edit the ID3 tags, which of course doesn't affect the audio quality, and I'm going to upload it, and it's going to be put out into this feed. So I don't touch it. But you're right. If I'm going to do any kind of editing, I'm going to record in WAV. But one of the things I want to warn you about and kind of bring up in this discussion, talking about the fact that some of us aren't audiophiles, but yet there are some people who are real picky. I'm really picky when it comes to audio quality in podcasting. The reason why is because pretty much most people have broadband, especially if they're listening to podcasts anyway.
I would think it would be impossible to download a podcast if you were on dial-up.
It
I
just
mean, it would just take too long.
there have been about 2 or 3 people over the last year says, I'm downloading your podcast and it takes me 4 hours.
And I'm on episode 2.
No doubt. I'm like, I'm not gonna change this. No. So
Yeah.
here's the situation. What do you, when you're using and exporting in Audacity, what bit rate are you exporting to?
I generally have it at 128, but sometimes for some our show also goes out on Sirius
Uh-huh.
once a week. We're part of Adam Curry's Pod Show block on Sirius, so
Right.
they have very specific requirements for how the files have to be. We have to put it out in mono and 96 kbps, and there's some other sort of characteristics that we have to put in there. But for the most part, most of my shows go out in stereo and on 128 kilobit.
Right. One of the have you ever noticed when you're playing back any of your shows? Now, I haven't really paid attention to your shows because I'm really, when I'm listening to your shows, I'm really listening to the content. Especially, by the way, the Randall Shreve interview on your Remarkable Mark Mark podcast.
Yeah, let's talk about that. My other podcast is called Remarkably Mark, and I call it, my tagline is A Chef's Life Outside the Kitchen. So it's my sort of hobby podcast. It's my fun podcast. It has a much smaller listenership, and it's just sort of, I get to talk about theater. I get to talk about, and I interview a lot of my friends who are still in the business. I talk to musicians. I talk about politics. I do New York City sound scene tours. So yeah, so I spoke with Randall Shreve, who is a musician that I discovered on MySpace, and I got a chance to go to his gig here in New York City a couple months ago, and he let me record it live using my binaurals, by the way. And then we had an interview, and I just put that out a couple weeks ago, and that was a lot of fun. This guy is a great musician.
He is.
I'll let Cliff talk about him.
I'll tell you what, you had sent over one of your live recordings to me of the song Hallelujah, that is typically, I think, made famous by Jeff Buckley and a couple other folks.
Yeah.
But I was turned
Well,
on.
and Rufus Wainwright recorded it for a movie, and there's been a lot of recordings of it because it's a beautiful song.
It is absolutely a beautiful song. And I had never heard of it before, except for a sound singing tour of Ireland, of Dublin, Ireland from Father
Right.
Roderick.
Father
And
Roderick, yeah.
So the Catholic Insider podcast, Father Roderick, this Dutch priest from the Netherlands, is doing a sound singing tour of Ireland, and there's a street musician playing with a little steel guitar and one of those little tiny box amplifiers, and he's singing Hallelujah, and Father Roderick captures that, and I fall in love with that song. In fact, I stripped the audio of that out and made it a file and put it in my MP3 player just to listen to.
Just to listen to it.
Exactly.
Wow.
I had never heard the song before, and I never knew that it was recorded anywhere. But
Yeah.
and then I got
And the funny story about that is that very same street musician, I've heard him play myself too. I was in Dublin a couple of years ago, and that he's right there on Grafton Street, which is a famous walking street in Dublin, Ireland, and that's his spot. He's always at that one spot right across from the flower market.
That is amazing.
And I've heard that actual musician live. Of course, if I had my equipment at the time, I would have probably recorded him too.
So then I hear from you and some other folks that Jeff Buckley and Rufus Wainwright and all these other folks had recorded this, and even I think what's her name, the country artist, what's her name, the controversial one, Katie Lang. That some people consider her to be controversial anyway.
Oh, has she recorded Hallelujah?
I believe so. I'm
Hey,
like 90.
yeah.
I'm like 90%
I know
sure.
Leonard Cohen. Leonard Cohen did
Yes.
a recording of it. Yeah.
So I went into iTunes and I tried to find one that sounded as close to that Irish or the Dublin musician as I could, and it came out to be Jeff Buckley. He won the contest.
Yeah.
So
well, that's appropriate since it's his song.
Exactly. So I downloaded that and and I paid for that, and then all of a sudden you sent me this piano rendition of it from Randall Shreve, and I'm like, no way, that sounds awesome. And then, of course, you turned me on to his music. I went over to his MySpace page over at myspace.com/Randall Shreve, and it's just like it sounds. Anyway, his music is simply phenomenal. I fell in love with everything he has on there.
and you kept saying, when are you going to have him on the podcast? I want to show him on the podcast. I said, yeah, I've been trying to get a hold of him. He was in the process of moving, basically,
Oh,
from he lived in Orlando for the last few years, and now he lives here in New York City. He moved here with his girlfriend, who had been living here already. And so when I managed to get him for the recording, he had literally been in New York for 1 week.
that's
Uh, yeah.
and what I wanted to just say that I've heard some music podcasts before. I've even put my own hand at the wheel to try to give that a shot, and I've listened to some of the other more professional ones, that at least the ones, let's just say, that have been around for a while. And then I listened to yours with Randall Shreve. I don't know if it's really so much that maybe it had a lot to do with the fact that I have recently really fallen in love with this music that he sings, and especially the fact that he writes his own music, he's playing his own music, singing his own music, and doing so much. And I know he does some covers, but he really has this dynamic sound all about him. And then the conversation that you had with him was amazing. And then how you mix the music, kind of like you fade it in while you're still having a conversation about the song, and then you fade into the song, and then you fade out, and the conversation flows. And I know you did a lot of that in post production, but I just want to say, to date, and I've listened to a lot of podcasts to date, your Remarkably Mark podcast, where you interviewed Randall Shreve, is by far the best music podcast episode I've ever heard.
Oh, thank you. Wow. That's quite a compliment. Thank you so much.
It was good. I mean, because you recorded, I guess, in a local pub or something. And
Yeah, we were actually at a place called Valhalla. It's a specialty beer bar, a bar, but they have specialty beers, on tap. So it's a great place if you like beers, different kinds of beers from Germany, Australia, New Zealand, all over the world. Great place.
and it was fitting for the style of interview and everything you were doing. So many interviews are done via Skype. I mean, we've all done that.
Well,
Little.
actually, yeah, and we had talked about it, and I said, look, if it works out for you, then we'll have to do that. But I said I'd really rather just meet you in person. I mean, I already met him in person, but I'm saying, for the interview, I'd rather just meet in person and get it, because there's something about the quality that you get in real life. And as you can't tell already, I'm really a big fan of things that are set in real life. I don't prefer my audio to be super clean with no sound in the background. I like real life sound. I'm trying to be very conscious that it not be so overwhelming that it really takes away from the experience. But I think for me as a listener, I love sound scene tours. I love even just regular interviews where I know there's real life going on in the background, because it's like I'm a fly on the wall.
Yes.
You get to sort of spy in on what two people are talking about, and it's in real life. It's not in a studio.
And that, you know what, and that's really what I'm about, is capturing real life events in podcasting. And I used to label it laziness, because I was just too lazy to spend hours and hours editing. I get tired of getting rid of all the through the recordings, and finally deciding, I'm just gonna release this. And when I did that, there was a couple times when I'm like, oh, I should really edit this, because Megan came in and interrupted me for just a moment. And I got overwhelming. It was an overwhelming number of
Uh-huh.
emails after the first time Megan interrupted a show. And we were right in the middle of a conversation. She comes down during, when she's supposed to be in bed. We have a little conversation. She asks us a question, and it's like, Megan, you're stalling. And I said, okay, it's time for you to go to bed. And she goes, yes, sir. And she goes right up to bed, and she goes, can I give you a kiss? And we give her a kiss, and then she heads back. And then we went back to the show. But we completely said, okay, we're in the middle of a conversation here. Our daughter has entered the room. Sorry, podcasting comes after family. We're dealing with family. Now we're back to podcasting. And that spoke volumes to our listeners, so much
Yep.
that we had 5 times as many emails that week than
Yeah.
we ever did before. And they
And you
said,
know what?
leave that in there.
Yeah, that's what I call. It's very simple. It's the power of authenticity, and we as podcasters have the ability to present life in an authentic way, and I mean that in two ways. In the first way, it's authentic just from a technical point of view. It's like, it's not glitzy. It's not in a studio. It's not in a theater. It's not like a film that, where they get to make 20 takes and get it perfect and then do CG with it and all that. It's just real life. And in a second way, I mean that it's authentic in the sense that Sorry, there's very authentic. There's
Exactly.
Steva in the background, letting the neighbors know that he doesn't like what they're doing. Um, but it's authentic in the sense that it really gives you an opportunity just to be real, and really have a real connection with people. And I think what you responded to most about that Randall Shreve interview was just his authenticity. I mean, he's a real guy, and he really is just very genuine. And we had a real connection. I mean, in that I really love his music too, and so that was just it was just a really great moment where we were relaxed and real with each other. And I think that we've been given media so often that is devoid of that real lifeness, and there's a certain degree of artifice that's sort of painted over so much of what we consume that it's just so refreshing to see real life once in a while.
It is, and I would never dream of taking Steva out of this because Steva is a part of who you are. I mean, Steva's even on the website.
He is. He's right there in my avatar. He's sticking out of my shirt. He's a little red miniature pincher who's feisty and tough and Napoleonic, just like his dad.
There you go. So yeah, and if I can take it back to the equipment side of things here,
Yeah, sure.
the Edirol, I had mentioned that I'm kind of just recording straight into this Edirol thing, and the other things that we can do with equipment is amazing. Just if you wouldn't mind telling me, what are some of your equipment setups that make for like your in studio recording? What kind of stuff are you using there? Do you use
Okay.
mixers? How are you doing that?
Absolutely. I'd love to talk about that. And in fact, I want to talk as much about the Edirol as possible, but I also do want to talk about the Marantz because I haven't stopped using it. Um, we still use that. Actually, my business partner Jennifer has it in her possession right now, and she uses it a lot too. So I think it has its place as well. But I was talking about the different, like the three different setups I have with the Adderall for field recording. There's the onboard mic, the binaural mic. I didn't actually get a chance to talk about the other mic that I use, which I use an EV, which is Electro Voice brand. It's the RE50B. It's a shock-mounted dynamic omnidirectional mic, and it's pretty much the industry standard when it comes to field reporter type microphones. It's really great because it's built really tough. It has very low handling noise, and it's got a really great windscreen. And it is an omnidirectional mic, so it's going to pick up the room. But the great thing about using this kind of mic with either the Edirol or the Marantz is that if I am in a loud environment, and quite often I do a lot of food events, wine tastings, conventions, dinners, awards dinners, things like that. We cover a lot of that on the Culinary Podcast Network. So I'm in a space where people are, having drinks and eating dinner, and they're talking in like a cocktail party, and it's noisy. So when I'm interviewing someone in that context, I can hold the microphone right up to their face, adjust my input volume so that it's lower, make sure that we're both speaking up, and then the noise in the room by contrast is lower. And so that enables me to really have somewhat control in a situation where I don't have any control of the noise. I can't say, everyone be quiet, we're recording, if we're in a restaurant.
Exactly.
So I'm able to adjust with that, and this microphone is just a really good microphone. So the way that I use that is because it's a standard microphone, so it uses XLR inputs. But I just have a very simple and very inexpensive, I think it was like $12 adapter. It's a female XLR to mini jack, to stereo mini jack, and that goes right into the same mic jack that you use right on top of the Edirol for the binaurals or for any
Right.
other mics that you use. And that has been a real lifesaver for me because with the Marantz, it only has XLR inputs. So I was only able ever to use this, standard reporter dynamic mic with Marantz. I wasn't able to use my binaurals with the Marantz. And
Right.
so prior to getting the Adderall, when I went on sound scene tours, I would use the old-fashioned solution, which was a Sony mini disc recorder, which
Oh,
it's fine. I mean, it's fine as a recorder, but where that becomes a problem is transferring files.
yes.
You have to plug it in via USB to your computer, and then it takes, you have to download the files and then transfer them and adjust them because they come out as some kind of Sony proprietary software, and then you have to convert it into a WAV file and do this, that, and the other. I mean, it's a lot of work that way.
Right.
So with the Edirol, I was able, I have now one solution. I have three recording setups. I can switch within 10 seconds. The only switch I have to make is on the unit itself. I have to switch the phantom power on or off, depending on which microphone I use.
Right.
With the handheld dynamic mic, I turn it off because obviously dynamic mics don't need the phantom power boost. And with the binaurals, I turn it on. It's as simple as that. And I'm able to record, as I said, I record onto the 16-bit wave. That's just my standard that I use.
Sure. One of the things I really love about the Edirol, and of course we're not being paid, by the way, by Edirol. We both probably paid full, not retail price, or not list price, but we both paid full price for our recorders. But my favorite thing...
I think I paid the list price.
Did you pay the list price?
Well, I paid $3.99 for it. So
yeah, you paid too much. Do you have a pen and a piece of paper, Mark? And if not, you can just listen to this podcast later. I'm going to tell you and everybody else a secret. This is a secret. It's only for us podcasters, okay? ProAudio.com. That's PRO audio.
Oh yeah, I know those
.com.
guys. Yeah.
Okay, they are all about broadcast. However, if you go to their website, they have very similar pricing on their website as musiciansfriend.com, which is very good pricing. However, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you, go to proaudio.com, write down the item and the item number and the price on the website, and write all that stuff down. Then click the contact button on that website. Get the phone number to give them a call at their 800 toll-free number. When you call them during business hours, Monday through Friday, call and ask for the sales department and ask to speak to a man named Scott Price. You will get an unbelievable discount.
Too low to advertise. We can't say it on the ad.
Well, I'm using a Heil PR40 broadcast microphone from Musician's Friend. I think I ended up paying like $328. I paid, and it was the same exact price on proaudio.com. I think I ended up paying like $235 for it from Scott Price.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is good for me to know because I actually have to buy 2 more Edirols relatively soon because we have 2 more podcasts that we're creating with other people who are in other parts of the country that so far we've been using the mini discs, but it's becoming unwieldy. So I'm going to have, we're ready to use the Edirols, and this is a great piece of equipment.
It is. And one of my favorite features of the Edirol is simply the little menu, the display on the front. It has all the information you could ever need. But I really dig the what would you call those bars? The meter bars.
Your levels.
Your audio levels are indicated. When I'm speaking, I see the bars raising. I can see when I'm peaking. And then, of course, we always have on the left-hand side of the machine or the unit, you can gain up or gain down your line levels. So if you're peaking too much in because of the environment, or you have your mic turned, for example, if I have my board turned up too high, I can actually lower the input and bring those levels. But I can consistently monitor the audio level, so that, one of the things that made me used to have to go in and edit audio was that I'd have to go in and adjust the audio levels because I wouldn't be able to get them just right.
Yeah. Or if you have 2 people speaking, one is maybe a little bit louder than the other, so you've got to balance them out.
Exactly. And what would happen is we would have it would be inevitable that when Stephanie and I co-host a show together, which we do quite often, when we do our sound check, she's always like, yeah, okay, testing 1 2. But when we're talking, she's like this.
It's like right, it's real somehow when you're live.
Exactly.
So she's at full voice.
And so basically what I would do, and when I used to record into the computer, I, of course, Audacity and all those other programs that you would use to capture audio, they have levels and you can see it. But typically I would bring up either a web browser or something on top of that to where the audio is being recorded in the background and I don't see it. And it's only after I'm done that I notice that Stephanie was talking really low. Whereas with having the Edirol coming out of the mixer, I'm able to adjust her slider up or down depending upon how loud or how soft she's talking. And so
Yeah.
that eliminated my need at all to go in and edit. And so that's why I basically I'm staring at my Edirol when we're recording. I'll glance over it times to time when Stephanie's having a conversation with me, and I can kind of adjust it, as
That's
we
your
on the fly.
monitor. Yeah.
Exactly.
And actually, there's another feature that it has, which is the auto gain control, which a lot of units have this. And what I like about it on the Edirol is that because again, I use it a lot out in the field. I get a lot of real life audio, and especially if I'm outside. Or if I'm in a loud place or I pass by something that's loud, the unit just automatically adjusts it so that it doesn't peak. And so I used to with the Marantz in order to monitor the levels really properly. I mean, it has its own sort of display, but in order to really properly monitor the levels, I would actually have to wear the headphones and literally monitor it. So
Right.
I would be the sound engineer and the interviewer. I'd be wearing headphones, I'd have the microphone, I'd be staring at the Marantz a lot, and you can adjust it literally. There's a dial on it, which is actually very useful. Again, I'm not saying anything against the Marantz. I love it. I think it's good for certain circumstances for me because I can really just very quickly adjust the levels should I need to. But with the Edirol, I can actually sort of be more in real life, more in the conversation, and trust that my levels are going to be fine in the final recording, and not have to worry about monitoring. So it doesn't take me out of the conversation mentally.
Now, you just said something amazing just a moment ago. You said, "Oh, that's good information because I'm going to need to go and buy 2 more Edirols." Now, of course, you may have heard this, but I'm doing podcast consulting now. And I'm so thankful that it's really taken off. I've gotten a lot of great leads, and people have been giving me calls, and I've done quite a bit of paid work. And everybody that I talk to that is super serious, I mean, they're ready to pay money to get good equipment and do this professionally. I also have done podcast consulting for people on a budget where I actually tell them to go get a Plantronics USB microphone for their computer. So, I mean, I podcast consult for all range of people.
And we'll get back to that too because I didn't finish answering the question about my setup, which we'll talk about that in a bit.
So I did this one interview or a podcast consulting gig with this gentleman. Now he's probably spent about $10,000 or $15,000 in a podcast studio. Okay, and he asked me for my opinion on a recording setup. And I said, listen, I've been podcasting for a while, and what I'm going to say to you is going to sound a little awkward, especially since you went ahead and already purchased a computer.
Oh, yeah.
Okay? I'm going to tell you that you're going to be better off using a dedicated digital audio recording device rather than using a computer to record your audio. And he says, really? Why is that? I said, well, there are 2 things. Number 1, computers crash. Number 2 is
and I think you have a little bit of experience with that lately.
Exactly. And number 2 is that, believe it or not, the internal mechanisms of computers can bring hissing sounds into your audio recording that's only noticeable to people who listen with headphones. However,
Absolutely.
You're producing podcasts, which, although you do not need an iPod or a portable digital audio device to play podcasts, most people do listen to them on them and will be listening with headphones. And they're going to hear your hard drive kicking in from time to time unless you do a lot of processing of your audio.
And also there's some EMI that are very faint and it's almost inaudible to the human ear, but it's very disturbing at the same time.
Yes, absolutely.
Sorry, I mean electromagnetic interference.
Exactly. And so here's what happened. He paid me good money for my podcasting advice, right? And didn't have any problem paying me for my advice, but he did not heed the number 1 recommendation of getting a dedicated device. Well, he actually wanted to heed my advice, but he had somebody else helping him. He's up in Michigan, but he had somebody else doing the producing of the audio. And so the guy says, I can't believe you paid that guy to give you that advice. That's stupid. We're not going to do that. We've got Audacity here. It's a computer. We're lined in. We're ready to go. The first 3 shows that he did, the Vista machine crashed on him right before they went live. The Macintosh system crashed on him right before they went live on the second night. And the XP machine crashed on him the third night.
Oh, wow.
All
And are they doing a show, like a talk show type show, where you
Yes.
have live people that are calling in at the same time?
Absolutely.
Right, so that just simply cannot happen. You
It-
need fail-safe, because if you're doing a live show where other people are calling in, it only takes once or twice for them to say, forget it.
Exactly.
We're not going to keep calling in if this
Yep.
show doesn't happen.
So the good thing is that TalkShoe has their very low bit audio recording online, and so they were able to release that in their feed. But that's horrible, you know.
Yeah.
And so I see he comes back and says, Cliff, I'm sorry, where do I get this device? And then he looks at it. He's like, $400.
And I can hold it in the palm of my hand. It looks like a tricorder.
He says,
It looks like the tricorder from the first Star Trek.
And he says, I've never paid $400 for a piece of plastic before in my life. I
Yeah.
said, you know what? When I got it, I felt the same way, especially when I opened the battery compartment to get my SD card out. But I'll tell you what, if it broke tonight, I'd have another one shipped overnight. I don't care if it cost me an extra $50 to get it here within 12 hours. I would pay it.
And speaking of extra $50, I went ahead and spent the extra $50 and got the case and the stand for it. There's an extra $50 case that you can buy for it. And what's nice about it is it's a leather case that protects it, but unlike many leather cases where everything is covered in it, it on the sides it's sort of very open, and you have access to every control on the unit except for the controls on the very back, which you very rarely have to adjust in the middle of recording. I mean, I can set my auto gain control on. I can set my external mic type to mono or stereo, the mic gain to low or high, the low cut either off or on, and then I can put it in the case, and then I don't need to touch those again. But I have access to every other control and every other port.
Now, where does the
when
stand
it's in
go?
that case? And the stand goes, it's a tripod that sort of folds itself out and it lays flat when it's not in use. On the very back of the case, there's a little screw that is very similar to the screw that is underneath the camera. And you just screw it in right there. And of course, you need the case in order to use a tripod. You can't have a tripod without the case itself.
I got you.
So there's no screw on the unit. The screw
I'm
is
looking
in
at
the,
my
it's
unit,
on
and
the
I'm like,
leather
I don't see the
case.
screw mark.
It's on the leather case. It's
I
sewn
gotcha.
into the back of the leather case, and it's that screw just like on the bottom of a camera where you would
That is
screw in the
awesome.
tripod. And so what you can do if you're recording, let's say you're a musician, you're recording, you can set the tripod at an angle, and you can set the whole unit exactly as you need it to be. Let's say you're recording, maybe you're a lawyer and you're recording a deposition. You can put it on the tripod at an angle right in front of the people that you're deposing, and you get the perfect angle, the perfect sound quality.
That is cool.
If you're using the onboard mic. I just, for me, it was more about the case. And the great thing about the case, it has this, I don't know if you can hear, I'm sort of snapping and unsnapping it. It has a little snap thing where you can actually run this thing through your belt, or you can just snap it onto your belt. And when I was at the New York Restaurant Show 2 weeks ago, basically my setup was amazing. I had my Adderall strapped to my belt. I had the extension for the microphone, and I'm just literally holding a microphone. And then the Adderall itself was underneath my blazer. So people were like looking like, where is this recorder? I just see a microphone.
That
I
is
used to be
awesome.
carrying, I had this thing strapped to my back. I had all kinds of junk with me. Now I have very little junk with me.
Well, that is cool. I'm gonna have to. If you happen to know of a link where you can get that, I have to look for that, because now I want my leather case mark.
Yeah, they're selling it at B&H, so you can get it there.
B&H. Right.
I hear that music, so I know we're near the end of the show.
Yep.
I just wanted to point out that without stealing any of your thunder, I like Cliff, also do some podcast consulting. Jennifer and I have a production company called Adventures in Gastronomy, and we do consulting for businesses that want to impact within the Epicurean space. But we also have been producing podcasts for companies, even companies that aren't in the food world at all. And so we offer our services in that regard. So people, if anyone is interested, they can contact me.
Especially whereabouts in New York are you?
I'm in New York City. I'm in Manhattan.
Okay.
And we also work with people in the whole region. The tri-state area. New Jersey, northern New Jersey, Westchester, Long Island. So that's certainly, I know that there are a lot of really great podcast consultants out there. Cliff knows a lot about this, and he's a great guy when it comes to a home studio setup. As you hear, most of what I do is out in the field, and so I'm sort of gathering real life and then coming back and editing it together. So it's like we get, we sort of attack the same beast from different angles.
Absolutely. So anyway, Mark, let's tell folks, and I'm going to have you back. Will you come back on to the podcast Answer Man? Not so
Absolutely.
much for just an interview, but just to talk about podcasting.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I can talk about it for a long time.
Of course, I do know that because we have done that before. So let's go ahead and we've got about another minute and a half. Tell folks, where can they find your podcasts at?
Okay. The easiest thing is to go to culinarypodcastnetwork.com, and there is our collection of all of the Culinary Podcast Network shows. The ones that we produce from the Gilded Fork are sort of the flagship shows. There's my show, which is called Remarkable Palate. My partner Jennifer, her show's called Food Philosophy. We also do one called the Culinary Roundtable. And very soon we're going to have a show called The Bachelor's Boot Camp, where Jennifer whips bachelors into shape so they can entertain their lady friends. And we're also going to have the Pastry Princess podcast and a brand new podcast called Welcome to Wine Country, where expert Rosina Tenari Wilson shares her 20 years as a wine judge with the audience, so to learn all about wine. And she's out in California. And people can also hear my personal podcast at remarkablymark.blogspot.com. And anyone who's interested in talking to me can always find me by email at remarkablepalate@gmail.com.
Wow. Thank you very much, Mark. It's been a pleasure to get to know you over the past 18 or so months, and enjoying your podcast as always. I want to thank you very much for being a part of the podcast Answer Man.
Likewise, and thank you so much for having me. It's always fun to talk to you.
All right, you can find this and all of our other podcasts at gspn.tv. Thanks for listening.
This show is brought to you by TalkShoe. Create your own internet talk show. Check it out at talkshoe.com.